Please welcome Developer Advocate from Google, Tony Chan.
こんにちは. Hello everyone. My name is Tony Chan, and I am a Google Developer Advocate for Android. And today I'm going to talk to you about Android market licensing. So let's take a look at the agenda for today. So the first thing I'm going to talk about what is market licensing. And the next thing is going to go over the architecture of the service, how pieces are tied together. And then I'm going to share with you some tips to secure your market licensing implementation. And the last item here is to help you to get started doing the implementation. So sounds good? So first question is, what is market licensing? So in one sentence, market licensing is a service offered by Google to tell you whether a user is licensed to use your application. So some more details. So the services will help you to protect your application on any devices that include the Android market app. And as a developer, you maintain full control of how your application enforces its licensing status. The integration itself is pretty straightforward using our license validation verification library. And any apps with API version 3, which is Android 1.5 or higher, can use this service. And the best of all, the service is free, available to all of you. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the architecture. So there are three major components in this market licensing service. Of course, your application, the market app, and the Google license server. So, of course, we need to have the user information in order to have to check against the Google server. And all three components on the left-hand side constitutes the Android phone. So, as a developer, your job is to integrate your application with the license verification library, and let's take a look at how the market licensing service in action. So the first thing is the user will click on your application, and which should trigger a license check on your app, and your app will try to bind to the market app if not already. And the market app will retrieve the user information on behalf of your app, and then send a request to the Google license server. The license server will send you back a signed license status, which the market apps will send it back to your application. And at this point, it's up to your policy, up to your implementation, how you react to the response. So now I'm going to share with you some tips on how to secure your market licensing implementation. But before that, let me ask you one question. So all developer may have this question in their mind also. So is my app secure after adding the market licensing service exactly like the sample code? So can you guys make a guess? Is that yes or no? If they implement the code exactly like the sample code. So the answer is no. And in fact, I want to make sure there's no miscommunication. So it's a big no. So turns out there's a lot of common mistakes developer made when they implement their market licensing implementation. So the number one mistake we have seen so far is they just use the sample code as is, which is very bad. And another common thing they forgot to do is to obfuscate the code, which is a really, really critical piece you have to do. And we also see like some developer did not terminate the application properly after receiving a license response. And finally, sometimes the license validation logic was simply flawed, probably because it's not tested thoroughly. So here are some tips like I'm going to share with you today to help to improve the security of your implementation. So there are 4 areas. The first area is the code obfuscation. The second point is modifying the license verification library code. And third is to make your application Tamper resistant. And the last one is consider offloading the license validation to a trusted server. So I'm going to talk about each of them in more detail now. So code obfuscation. So what is that? So obfuscation is a technique in software engineering to transform your code to some non-human friendly format. So the idea is to make reverse engineering very hard. But code obfuscation also have some limitations. For example, it won't help to prevent by automated attacks, and also it can alter the flow of your program. There are a lot of obfuscators available out there, both free and commercial, and we have some good experience with Proguard. So Proguard is a free open source software under the GPL, and I have their main website here. We also have a blog post to cover in details how you can integrate Proguard with your Android application. And we also have a helper project at code.google.com under the name Android-Proguard-command line. But before you can use this helper project, you have to install Android SDK tools version 7 or above. So the next tips I want to talk about is to modifying the library code. The goal here is to make your implementation unique. So there are 3 areas you can modify. So the core library logic, the entry or exit points of the library, and how your application invoked LVL and handles license response properly. So for modifying the core LVL logic, there are basically 2 classes you want to focus on. So the first one is the license checker, and the second one is the license validator. There are many things you can tweak in the code while keeping the functionality the same. So for example, you can replace a switch statement with if statements. You can also use hash functions to derive new values for any constant you use. And you can also consider remove unused code or any public interface you don't need. You can also consider moving all your code, your library, the license check code, into your own package. And in order to make reverse engineering more difficult, you can spawn additional threads to handle different parts of the license validation. You can even replace functions with inline code wherever possible. So here's a snippet from the original sample code. And you can see here we are using the switch statement and also using the response code directly. But let's see how we can improve this sample code. So here's an improved version of the sample code. So the first thing I did was adding a hash function here to compute a new response code value. So any hacker or attacker's attempt to detect the original response code, that kind of attempt will not work because of this. Another thing I did here is to replace the switch statement with if statements. So the nice things about this is you can actually add additional unrelated code in between the if statements, so that like when the hacker look at the bytecode, it's kind of more like confuse them more and make it harder to reverse engineer. Entry/exit points of the library. So some attackers, they may try to swap your implementation with the version if the classes have a public interface. So there are two ways you can counter this kind of attack. So the first way is to add additional arguments to some important constructors or methods, just like the example here. And the second way is you can remove policy interface. If you only have one policy in your implementation, there's no need you have to have implement the interface. You can just have your code actually in line with the rest of the code. So some tips on how to doing proper license check and response handling. The first thing is avoid putting license check code in the onCreate methods, because this method is actually used by the Android system. It's looked up by the Android system. So you can actually obfuscate this method. Another point is try to invoke a different activity rather than a dialogue to inform your user whenever there is a license failure. Because sometimes attacker may try to disable a dialogue so that they can continue run your application. So by invoking a different activity, you make sure you can terminate the original activity you had. Also consider adding additional finished statements to make sure your app is properly terminated when the user is not licensed to use your app. And finally, make sure you handle all the edge cases. For example, set up a timer thread that will handle license check properly whenever you experience a network timeout. Okay, so some tips on how to make your app tamper resistant. So there are a couple things. The first thing is consider adding code to compare the current app signature with the good known value. And this good known value is ideally coming from a trusted server. And the next things you can consider is to adding code to compute the checksum of the current app's files and compare that to the good known checksum. The last thing is to try to alter your code logic when the app is running in debug mode. So this is really effective, especially like when hackers try to enable debug mode and see like some logs output. If you change your logic, it makes it really hard for them to reverse engineering. So this is the last tips I want to share is to offload license validation to a trusted server. And there are pros and cons of this technique. The pros of doing this is this technique is actually very difficult to crack because like all the validation is actually happening on a trusted environment instead of on the user Android phone. Another pros of this approach is you can do a more fine-grained license check, for example, in the per device level. But one thing you have to keep in mind is you have to have your own server to keep track of all these devices, because the Google license server will not keep track of this for you. Some of the cons, this technique is only effective if your app is serving like online content, because otherwise you will run into the same problems like the hackers try to tamper your validation response back from your server. Another con is you have to maintain your own server for this, and also the solution is usually harder to implement. So summary. So in summary for this section, so make sure your implementation is unique and change your implementation often. Consider doing that every release, and you don't have to do a lot of changes. Sometimes it's just such a small change it's good enough to make the hacker have a headache. Also, make your code actually difficult to trace when it decompiled, and also make your code resistant to any changes. And last but not the least, be creative. So in your implementation, try to give the hacker a hard time. So with all these tips and advice, you must be excited to get started to start your implementation. So let me show you how to get started on this. So there are 4 steps. So sign up a publisher account, set up your development environment, start the integration, and then do a lot of tests. So for sign up, you need to have an Android Market publisher account. So and you have to use an existing account if you want to add licensing support to your already published applications. So for the publisher account, besides you can publish license and free applications, now you can obtain the public key that is used to decrypt the license responses coming from the Google license server. We also know testing is very important, so that's why we provide a tool in the publisher account for you to test and debug your licensing implementation. Set up. So there are a couple of things you need to do. So first, you need to download the latest SDK in order to debug your implementation in the emulator. You need to set up the runtime environment and the project configuration. And then you need to download and set up the market licensing package, the library. And there's an optional step. If you want to use this new service as an Android library project, which is a new project type we introduced recently, you have to download the latest ADD plugin in order to use that. So I'm going to go into more details now. So for downloading the SDK, you can download it through the Android SDK manager, which you guys should be pretty familiar with. You need to have the API 8 revision 2 or above, and with the Google API add-on. Setting up the runtime environment. So if you are going to test your implementation on a device, all you need is to have a device with Android 1.5 or above. And of course, you need to have the Android Market app installed. But that should be available in any Android-compatible devices. If you're going to test your implementation on an emulator, you need to download the API 8, the add-on, API 8 Release 2 or above, because that comes with the Android Market app. And you also need to add a Google account under the account and sync settings, and sign in using your publisher account or some other test account credential, which I will talk about that a little bit later. So for project configuration, there's no need to change anything if your project is already using Android 1.5 version 3 or above. If for any reason you guys are not using this, it's time to upgrade. So for downloading the licensing library, again, it's also conveniently available through the Android SDK manager under the name Market Licensing Package. Before you use the library, you have to move the library, and if you want to try the sample code, move the sample code as well to a new location, for example, your Eclipse workspace. You don't use the code actually right in the Android SDK folder. So setting up the library. So after you move it to your workspace, you can import the project just like any other project in Eclipse. If you want to add the library as an Android library project, so one thing you need to check. So you have to go to your Android properties, your project properties, and look at in the Android sections and see whether you see this like library sections. If you don't see this, that means you probably have an older version of ATT plugin, and you need to download a later version. So you need the version 0.9.7 or above, and it's available through the regular software update tools available in Eclipse. So after all this setup, so you can start like doing the integration. So the first thing you need to do is to modify your app's manifest by adding a new permission. It's called com.android.vending.check_license. After that, you need to define a policy. The library we give you comes with two fully implemented policy. The first one is called server managed policy. It's our recommendation. So this policy will cache license responses and handle like various conditions like when there's no network, things like that. And we also have a stricter policy if you want one. And this strict policy will require all the response actually must come from the market license server. If none of these policies actually fit your needs, you can always like define your own policy by implementing the policy interface. So after that, you can start like adding code to your Android app to check to do all the license check in your app's main activities. And there's another optional things you can do if you want to limit the license to the device levels. As we mentioned before, you can implement a device limiter. But again, it's your responsibility to keep track of all these devices on your own server. So the Android market server, licensing server, will not keep track of that for you. So testing. So testing is super important. So that's why we have a tool in the publisher, in your publisher account to help you to do testing. So so this is the page, a screenshot I got from the publisher account. So here you can add additional, besides the publisher account, you can add additional test account for your development team to test like different license responses. And this is also the place you get the public key, which is used for checking to check the license response, the signed license response. So here's a table with all the different account types. For the publisher account, so you can do everything like checking the license even before the application got uploaded. You can receive like test response and also set the type of response you want to receive. For the test account, it can only receive test response set by the publisher account. For the rest of the user, they will receive all the normal response from our license server. So there are a lot of resources available in our website, and I just cover like just the key information today, and I strongly encourage you to go to visit our developer guide for market licensing, and also we also have a 3-part series blog post specifically talking about market licensing. And when you start doing your implementation, if you run into issues on the licensing library, please raise the issues in the issue tracker here. And finally, as you guys are already familiar with, we have like forums for general like Android questions and also Android market questions. So that's pretty much all I have for today, and I hope you find the talk informative. And again, like as always, like our service will not be like successful without you, the developer, to use it. So please start to use the market licensing, and we hope like this service will help to protect your intellectual property, and so everyone will have to pay to use your app and properly. And so thank you very much for your time today, and that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. ありがとうございました。And after we have a Q&A like in later on in afternoon later, so feel free to come to talk to me if you have any questions later on. Thank you.